Mr. Carl, before we go and just go deep into our conversation, of course, I would like you to greet the One Africa listener who have been dying to meet you, who have been asking for you. You know what? There is the charismatic old Mandela, who is just doing phenomenal things, especially when you started to campaign for the EFF. But before that, I just want us to, just have a short background of who Carl Niehaus is, and just tell us a little bit about your upbringing, as a young white, boy growing up in the Northwest, as you say, you from the Northwest. For us to get an idea of how did Carl Niehaus, grow up.
I grew up in a very conservative white Afrikaner family.
Yes.
In a small town in what is now known as the Northwest Province. Then it was called the Western Transvaal, with the name of Zeerust. And of course, I grew up with all the racism, the negativity towards the majority of African people in this country, the racism also of my own father and mother and my family. But at the age of 16, I started to ask questions about what is going on in South Africa. I remember I went for the first time, and that's also already an indictment on our society, that only at 16, I ended up for the first time going into a black township, into Soweto.
Just to cut, I wanted to know what had inspired you, to go into Soweto, because obviously at that point in time, it was a rough place, and for a white young guy, it was, unless if he was, and I'm not trying to insult you, unless if he was, that child who was a naughty white child, he would have been there.
I was part of a religious group
that
went into Soweto.
Yes.
But I've always been, even at the young age, someone who was inquiring, who wanted to know my country.
Yes.
And I was absolutely shocked to see the huge discrepancies between the poverty and the exploitation of Soweto on the one hand, and the comfort with which I was living in my white middle-class suburb. That led me to ask questions, but what is going on? Why do we have these inequalities in our society? And then a year later was 1976, 16th of June, the youth uprisings. And in my very white Afrikaans school, I started asking questions. I said, no, I think the young black South Africans are correct to rise up against this system that are oppressing them. I want to see full liberation in this country. That's why I joined the ANC. And during the many years that I've been a member of the ANC, I've always been committed to that ideal of economic liberation and the empowerment of the majority of black and especially African people. Now, I believe originally those ideals did have part of the view and of the objectives of the African National Congress. But as time went on, the leadership of the ANC sold out.
Absolutely.
They became now part of an agreement that the existing capitalist, neoliberal, white economic establishment will not be disturbed.
Yes.
And in fact, they sold their liberation ideals for what I call in biblical terms a pot of lentil soup. They were prepared to take the crumbs from the table of the white monopoly capitalist masters and sold their own South African people for that. Today you see the African National Congress leadership being fat cats. They don't care for the majority of people in this country. They're only interested in how they can get their bank accounts to bulge more and more. They're only interested in taking care of their own wealth. They talk still liberation language, but that is a lie. It is a farce. The reality is that they are part of the exploitation of the majority of black and African people. In fact, what I call them comprador capitalists, people in the service of imperialism, who have sold out the liberation ideals, who are a shame, not just to South Africa, but to the whole African continent. And that's why I'm so grateful for the way that the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the Economic Freedom Fighters, always call them out.
Yes.
Not just in the context of the betrayal in South Africa, but their betrayal to the people of Africa and the African continent.
So Mr. Carl, you were there in 1992, obviously, as a spokesperson, and obviously you were the writer at the African National Congress. You were writing the speeches, particularly for President Nelson Mandela. And in 1992, I believe, the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. What happened there?
I can't hear.
In 1992, right, in Davos, the president changes his script, I call it a script, a night before he presents, and he had certain beliefs that he believed in, and the next morning he is saying something different. And I believe because you were closer by the time, you probably know what actually transpired. Because the president believed in socialism, he believed in a whole lot of concepts that he changed, and he took a capitalism stature. And what could have happened there in Davos that particular day?
You talk about a very critical moment.
Yes.
In the history of our country, and a moment of betrayal. When President Mandela came out of prison, the first speeches he made, he continued to commit the African National Congress to the economic program of nationalization of the mines, the big industries, the return of the land to the people. And then he went on his first visit to the World Economic Forum, not long after he was released.
Of course.
And he was accompanied by one Tito Mboweni, who was then one of the members of the ANC's economic desk. And in fact, he was President Zuma's President Mandela's economic advisor. And he traveled with President Mandela to Davos. In Davos, apparently, Tito Mboweni decided that this speech committing the ANC to nationalization of the big industries will be unacceptable. And he took the speech, a speech, by the way, that myself and members of the economics unit of the African National Congress had written for President Mandela.
Before he can depart.
And he trashed
Yes.
those paragraphs in the speech that referred to nationalization. He replaced them with new liberal economic policy ideas. And unfortunately, that is the speech that President Mandela then read out at Davos, which suddenly changed the ANC's economic policy program from a program of pro-socialism, concern about the majority of people in this country, a program of nationalization of the commanding heights of the economy, in a moment, without any consultation. It was changed to now committing the ANC to the protection of property rights of white colonists who stole the land from the people, to a continuation of exploitation of the majority of black and African people, because also saying that we will continue to allow the white monopoly capitalist companies to continue to run South Africa's economy undisturbed. Myself and other members of the ANC's leadership were absolutely shocked when we listened to that speech, because sadly enough, there was no consultation with the leadership of the ANC about that fundamental U-turn that was made. There was no discussion in the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress. So I blame Tito Mboweni, but I also blame President Mandela, I must be honest.
Of course.
President Mandela should not have allowed Tito Mboweni to change the speech in the way that he did. And that was a huge betrayal, also by President Mandela, of the full economic liberation ideals that we've stood for and that so many South Africans believed that the African National Congress stood for, and so many liberation fighters had laid down their lives for those ideals. So since then, unfortunately, that arbitrary action by President Mandela had put us on a trajectory that led to an increasing implementation of new liberal economic policies, of the continuation of the empowerment of imperialist exploitation and extraction of the wealth from South Africa without it being shared by the majority of black and African people. President Jacob Zuma, during his term, tried to turn that tide around. But you know the attacks that were launched on him by the whole imperialist world, also here in South Africa. I always say that was the only time that I saw white grannies dancing and chanting, Zuma must go. So there was a massive mobilization, internally and internationally, to prevent President Zuma from turning us away from those new liberal economic policies. And sadly, that massive mobilization succeeded. So today we're continuing along a trajectory of the empowerment of white monopoly capitalists. In fact, today it is even worse than ever before, because under this sellout president, this agent of imperialism and white monopoly capitalism, Cyril Ramaphosa, we have seen the full empowerment of the white monopoly capitalist environment in South Africa. Today, black people and African people are more disadvantaged than ever since 1994. There is less empowerment of black leadership. In fact, black excellence and black leadership and black executives are actively being undermined and their careers are being destroyed. Just think of Brian Molefe, Marcelo Koko, great leaders who are making a massive difference at Eskom. Think about what Cyril Ramaphosa and his sell-out ANC accolades did to the People's Public Protector, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane. What recently happened with the impeachment of the Judge President of the Western Cape, Mr. Justice John Slopen. And you see that Ramaphosa has become a wrecking ball, acting on behalf of his masters, of those who control him, which are imperialist masters and white monopoly capitalism in South Africa. The Ruperts, the Oppenheimers, the Menels are in control. And they are the puppet masters who are pulling the strings of this sellout Cyril Ramaphosa.
So I want to ask you, Mr. Carl Niehaus, that you sound convinced, and you're speaking it convincingly, that Cyril Ramaphosa is, in cahoots with the so-called white monopoly capital. And of course, I mean, who can blame you? You've been in the ANC. You have seen everything. You were there when Nelson Mandela came out. Much as they say you were one of the last prisoners to come out. But of course, when you worked in the African National Congress, where was Cyril Ramaphosa, and how did he become so close to the white monopoly capital more than any of the African National Congress leaders who were there, politicians who were there at that particular time?
Just remember who Cyril Ramaphosa was right from the beginning. Ramaphosa was never a worker. He grew up in a family where his dad was a policeman during the apartheid era. He went to university. He studied for a law degree, Apparently, he got a little bit involved in politics, according to what Terra Lekota tells us. He was detained. He immediately went belly up to the police. He wrote a letter under the instigation of his father, who was a policeman who visited him when he was arrested, saying that Terra Lekota and other members of the Black Consciousness movement placed communist and socialist ideas in his head. They went to Robben Island. He walked free. He sold out already at that young age. Then subsequently, he became involved with the Menel family, who took care of him, who paid for his studies. Irene Menel, the matriarch of the Menel family, the wife of Clive Menel, was the owner of the second largest mining company in South Africa. She said, we put Cyril Ramaphosa onto the board of the Urban Foundation as an insurance policy, so that for the future, he will protect us against African black radicalism. That was done together with the Oppenheimers. When it became clear that there was a growth in radical worker solidarity and consciousness, especially amongst the black mine workers, and finally it became inevitable that unions will be formed for black mine workers, African mine workers, Harry Oppenheimer said, let's get a stooge to lead a national union of mine workers so that we can control this unionization. We can prevent the African mine workers to truly give expression to their fundamental radicalism and unhappiness about the exploitation. So the NUM was formed in conjunction with the mine bosses, with Harry Oppenheimer, Anglo-American, gave NUM their first offices. Cyril Ramaphosa, for all practical purposes, was in cahoots with the mine bosses, with Anglo-American, in fact, was employed by them. So that is the background of this man, Cyril Ramaphosa. In 1991, when he suddenly emerged as part now of the Mandela Reception Committee, he's walking out of Victor Verster there behind Mandela. You just see him there. He's popping up everywhere. When Mandela is standing on the balcony of the Cape Town City Hall to speak, suddenly Ramaphosa takes the mic and holds it. He inserts himself in the pictures and also in the national consciousness of our people. The Menels, the Oppenheimers, these big white monopoly capitalists then go to Mandela and say, you know, we think Ramaphosa is a good idea for becoming the Secretary General of the ANC. And at the first national conference of the ANC in Durban, suddenly Cyril Ramaphosa is parachuted in, also with the assistance of Nelson Mandela, because he has been advised by these white monopoly capitalists that they would like to see Ramaphosa there. And there was a very interesting incident there. You know, President Oliver Tambo came back from exile. He wasn't well, he had a stroke. But he was truly the person who understood the ANC. He also knew that Ramaphosa was nowhere. So when Ramaphosa suddenly walked in and became prominent at the national conference of the ANC there in Durban, I was on the stage when Oliver Tambo looked at him as he came in and he pointed at him and he said, Ubani law. And then, of course, he continued to push himself forward, also as Secretary General of the ANC. He took over from Thabo Mbeki as the chief negotiator of the ANC during the CODESA negotiations. And the result, the consequences we can see. Ramaphosa gave us a sellout constitution. He gave us a situation now where property rights for whites are guaranteed in Section 25 of the Constitution, and he benefited handsomely from all of that. I always say, when I first met Cyril Ramaphosa, he drove a Volkswagen Golf. After he sold us out at the CODESA negotiations, he was on the luxury back seat of the largest 7 Series BMW. They took well care of him, but he never took care of the people of this country. For him, it was only about himself, his own selfish interests, his own economic empowerment.
Okay, but Mr. Carl, so somebody might be listening right now and they're saying, yeah, but Carl Niehaus and the likes and everyone else who keep continuously talk about white monopoly capital and Cyril associated with President Cyril Ramaphosa, they're probably bitter because the African National Congress puked them out. And one question that I saw as I was preparing for this interview, one asked that, no, but isn't Carl Niehaus, didn't he form his own political party? And he was a student, my great supporter of Jacob Zuma. Jacob Zuma also started his own political party, and he was alongside Ace Magashule. They also started their own political parties. But now here is Carl Niehaus, he's in the African National Congress. Why can't they form one thing together? So it means they are also not just, they don't trust each other. And I mean, if they can trust each other, how can we trust them when they tell us about white monopoly capital, about Cyril Ramaphosa being, associated with white monopoly capital? And how can you justify the fact that you come across as scattered as opposed to being united as the RET forces, as you were called before the conference?
You said many things,
yes,
and I need to respond to all of them.
Absolutely. In a short...
Let me first of all say, I've been fighting against the selling out of the liberation ideals by the leadership of the African National Congress for 3 decades. I first of all said I must do that inside the ANC. And I tried my level best. I'm sure my history is known for how I spoke out against the selling out of the true liberation ideals. How there were times that I stood like my finger alone, protesting outside National Executive Committee meetings of the African National Congress. Then, in December 2022, after Ramaphosa was once again elected with the help of the money of imperialists and white monopoly capitalists, once again bought his position in the ANC, I decided that although the ANC was trying to expel me and they brought charges against me, and I appealed against that expulsion, which meant that I was still a member of the ANC, I said, no, this has gone far enough. The ANC is beyond salvation. I am resigned. And I resigned and then formed the African Radical Economic Transformation Alliance, which was a political party with the intention of supporting the objective of getting radical economic transformation in South Africa implemented. But parallel, going closely together with that radical economic transformation commitment, I said we must work for unity. And I said that the role of Areta will be to try and forge unity amongst all the progressive left forces in this country.
Mr. Carl, I'm going to need to fast forward you because we are losing time, and I still need you to.
I'll make the point.
Yes,
very
and I'd like to.
So that was what Areta stood for.
Yes, absolutely.
And I strongly disagreed with Ace Magashule with the formation of ACT. I said we mustn't form more political parties.
Yes.
We must rather unite. As much as I love President Zuma, I also told him, Baba, I don't think you should form a new political party called the MK Party. Let us all unite.
Yes.
I pleaded with President Zuma to become a member of the Economic Freedom Fighters, and even if he was not prepared to become a member, to come out in support of the EFF. Because my view is that the EFF is the strongest, well-organized, ideologically clear black revolutionary party in South Africa. And that's why, after 10 months of Areta, I said, look, it makes no sense to continue with Areta as a separate party. Let me join my fellow revolutionaries who I anyhow have no difference with in the economic freedom fighters. And that's why I joined the EFF. I'm very happy to have joined the EFF. I said the other day that this is the happiest time of my economic life for the last 44 years, because in the EFF, I find the true expression of commitment, not just to liberation in South Africa, but also to the liberation of the African continent, of a united, strong Africa. I love those positions that my commander-in-chief and president have taken. I see you have a photo here in the studio of Kwame Nkrumah.
Yes.
Just the other day, Commander Julius Malema went to Ghana. He addressed a very important meeting there. And then he also stood in front of that statue.
Yes.
In the same posture, giving the same message that Kwame Nkrumah always brought, of unity and pan-African unity amongst all the African people, because it is only in that unity that Africa will be able to find its place in the world and will be able to be the strong economic power. With all these divisions of colonial powers being gotten rid of, only in that position, as a united Africa, will Africa be able to get to its full potential and come to its own. And I love that position of my president. I love the way in which the economic freedom fighters are committed to full economic freedom in our lifetime, based on a clear set of ideologies as expressed in the 7 cardinal pillars that the EFF is based on.
You are working hard in the EFF. We see you campaigning. And of course, there are voice notes here, a couple of voice notes that I would like our listeners have sent to us. And I would like you to respond to them. And of course, wow, time flies when you were sitting with Mr. Carl Niehaus. And I believe in fact, we need more time with you.
I'd love to come in again.
Of course, we will definitely make sure that you come again. Can I just play one of the voice notes that we have received from one of our listeners, and let's hear if we've got.
My question is, why do we have to vote for EFF? Why do we even have to vote for any party?
I can't hear.
Why are the parties
I
not?
think you're going to have to help me up.
Perhaps you can summarize what the listener said, because I could hear her beginning to speak and then I couldn't hear her.
Yeah, I think there was a bit of a technical problem there. Can we play it?
My question is, why do we have to vote for EFF? Why do we even have to vote for any party? Why are the parties not coming together to prove that they really want to see South Africa going forward or South Africa succeeding? I do not believe in this current state that we live in there's any party that deserves anybody's vote, but I believe the parties need to show a difference in the intent of what they want to do for the country. So can you really answer this question in a fair manner to make me understand why does any party at this current moment, at this current state that we live in, deserves our vote?
I agree with the sentiment that the listener is expressing, that political parties on the progressive left should be united.
Yes.
But I think let's see what the voters give us during the elections on the 29th of May.
Yes.
And if the voters tell us that they want the progressive left political parties to come into a coalition in order to take control of the country, then we must be politically mature enough to work towards that. My view is that the Economic Freedom Fighters is the strongest left progressive party. It has earned its stripes in the last 11 years. It has developed strong organizational capacity. It is ideologically very clear, as I've said. Therefore, I would like to call on that listener and on all the listeners today to support the EFF, to vote for the Economic Freedom Fighters, and to make the EFF the strong left progressive force that then can also, from a position of strength, forge unity amongst all the progressive left in the country, under the leadership of a young, very strong, and very charismatic leader, Commander Julius Malema. I would love to see the president of the Economic Freedom Fighters after the 29th of May to be the president of this country. I'd love to see the EFF taking the lead in forging that unity. And to respond to the question of the listener,
Yes.
vote for the EFF, because the EFF is the only party that has the capacity and also the clarity of ideology and revolutionary commitment to bring about the fundamental economic transformation. Now we have a huge opportunity to make it happen. Let us vote for the EFF in this 29th of May 2024 election to make that dream of South African economic empowerment and African economic empowerment a reality.
Mr. Carl Niehaus, thank you very much. We are truly, truly blessed to have you here in studio. Thank you very much. Well, that was Carl Niehaus, and well, we are privileged to have you. And can we have you again here in studio? Because, you know, there's just so much that he needed to share with us. And of course, the time was just so minimal. And we truly, truly appreciate, you know, taking your time and then coming to be with us. You know, in the mornings, I know old people are grumpy in the mornings, but you look very young and fresh.
I'm up 4 o'clock in the morning.
Are you going to Mr. Jacob Zuma's birthday party?
No, today I'm going to Lenasia.
Oh, yes.
There's a town hall meeting that is convened by President Julius Malema,
Yes.
reaching out to the so-called minority communities, especially the Indian community
Absolutely.
in Lenasia, also bringing the message that all the various minority communities in South Africa are part of South Africa and also have a home in the Economic Freedom Fighters. So that is how I'm going to spend my day today, campaigning for the Economic Freedom Fighters. And let me conclude with this message.
Yes.
Viva South Africa. Viva Africa. Mayibuye Africa.